you guys are here, it's probably for the Women Were Always Wild series, where I promised you we would dig into the wildest and messiest women of old Hollywood. And what better way to start that off than with Barbara Payton, who you guys learned a little bit about on TikTok. She was the wildest of them all in old Hollywood. And today I'm finally going to give you guys the tea on what it was that Barbara did of all of her many scandalous and messy affairs that led to Hollywood blackballing her once and for all. So here's the tea on Barbara's messy three-way entanglement with early film star Franchot Tone and B-list heavyweight Tom Neal. Franchot Tone met Barbara in 1950 while judging a dance competition Barbara was a part of. The buttoned-up star of a bygone era was immediately smitten with the blonde bombshell Barbara, but his ex-wife, Joan Crawford, warned him that Barbara was too young for him and a floozy to boot. However, like most men who claim they would never make a hoe into a housewife and then turn around and do it anyway because men usually want what they can't have, they just don't like to admit it, Franchot was determined to prove Joan wrong and decided he would tame the wild beast known as Barbara. And I'm not kidding when I say he was quite literally trying to turn a hoe into a housewife. He would do things like buying her classier, more conservative clothes so that she would fit in with his crowd, bought her jewelry and expensive furs, which she would of course wear, but would then ratify by wearing face tattoos. The temporary face tats would become her signature look, the conservative clothing would not, and that should have been Tone's first clue that he wasn't turning Barbara into anything but a rich woman, especially when she wore her ghetto fabulous fashion to the hottest club in New York, the Stork Club, when Tone announced their wedding engagement. But hey, it wasn't as if Barbara ever pretended to be someone she wasn't with Tone. He already knew she was good for taking her leading men to bed because he caught her in bed with the Hollywood hunk Guy Madison, which we talked about on TikTok, go watch, along with plenty other scandalous affairs. Not long after their engagement, Franchot would go back to New York to work while Barbara filmed a B picture where she would meet her newest conquest, the hunky Hollywood action hero, Tom Neal. Messy Boots Barbara, not long after meeting her co-star, and by not long I mean 4 minutes after, according to her, decided right then and there that Neal was the man for her, not Tone, and she called off her engagement to Franchot and proposed marriage to Tom. She went on to announce this development to the press, where Tone would have to find out like the rest of the public, in the papers. Neal also put out a statement saying, well, Barbara was supposed to marry Tone, but she proposed to me. She said I was more exciting. I guess Tone decided he was going to get adventurous real fast because when he landed in LA, he immediately sought out his ex-fiancée and arranged a secret rendezvous at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And it must have been a pretty convincing conversation because not long after, Barbara had an overnight bag of her things sent to Beverly Hills and spent the night partying with Tone. They went back to Barbara's apartment where Tom was already in the midst of his bachelor party, and as you could imagine, words and hands were exchanged. Or rather, hands were caught by Tone, who got his ass beat so severely that to call that interaction a fight would just be a lie. Tom beat Franchot to a pulp. No exaggeration, he punched that man so hard it sent him flying across the room, rendering him temporarily unconscious, to which Neal still did not let up on Tone, disfiguring that man's face in the process and accidentally giving Barbara, who tried to intervene, a black eye. And as if all of that wasn't bad enough, Tom wailed on this poor man for 10 minutes straight before anyone was able to get him off of a now unrecognizable Tone. All of this happened the night before Barbara and Tom were set to be married. Franchot Tone was out for 18 hours straight, and the police speculated that he might die in the hospital. And they claimed that if he did die at Tom's hands, that Tom would be charged for murder in the first degree. Meanwhile, his face was so badly deformed that he had to have plastic surgery to reconstruct it into anything resembling what it used to be. Fortunately, Tone did pull through. However, unfortunately, Barbara was still in his life, which meant his trouble was far from over. While he recovered in the hospital, Barbara visited him daily with a thermos full of homemade cocktails, and she would sit and drink with Tone through his recovery during the day while partying with Tom at night. The paparazzi captured all of this, and the public was, understandably, disgusted and scandalized by this behavior. Weeks later, Tone and Barbara would elope after Tone dropped the charges against Tom Neal. And after all of that, their marriage only lasted a year before Tone divorced Barbara. And even after all of that, he still would not stay away from Barbara because they reconciled not long after. And at no point did Barbara ever stop seeing Tom, nor did she hide it. So at this point, it was clear that these were three deeply troubled and toxic people who were addicted to the drama of this relationship. And it wasn't until after Barbara tried to take her own life while in Tone's presence that shit got too real for him and he left her for good. And after that, everyone left Barbara for good. Her studio, the A-list films she'd finally snagged a part on, and the general public. Nobody wanted anything to do with Barbara anymore. She tried to resurrect her career in London, where she starred in a few films that she claims were successful, before coming back to LA to do a few B pictures, all with Tom Neal now on her arm, whose career honestly wasn't faring much better. Barbara slipped deeper and deeper into the bottle, broke up with Tom, and began getting into financial trouble. She began having to beg, borrow, and steal her way into taking care of herself, and finally turned to tricking to make a living. Eventually, the only people that wanted anything to do with Barbara were gossip magazines, to whom she would sell her salacious stories with famous men for money, pimps, and johns. She would publish her autobiography, I Am Not Ashamed, in 1963, where she laid it all bare. Not only did she put her scandalous affairs out there, but those of the men in Hollywood who would gladly pay her $500 a trick before she had become the street-level sex worker that she would end her life being.